The healing wing of Vairmore Castle smelled of crushed herbs and old stone. It was a quiet place, tucked away from the grand halls where lords argued and warriors trained. Most people in the kingdom never thought about this room, but Lyra Sundale spent almost every hour of her life inside it. She was 24 years old, thin from long nights of work, with steady hands and tired eyes. She was not a noble. She was not a warrior. She was simply a healer, the daughter of a healer, trained since childhood to stitch wounds, mix medicine, and comfort the dying. In a kingdom ruled by strength, where wolves proved their worth through battle, Lyra's gift went mostly unnoticed. But she did not mind. She believed her work mattered, even if no one important ever saw it. Vairmore was ruled by Alpha King Draven Ashcroft, a powerful and fair leader who had kept peace in the region for 10 years. He was respected, even loved by his people. Beside him stood Lord Cassian Vale, his closest friend since childhood and his most trusted advisor. Together, they were seen as the heart and mind of the kingdom. Draven led with strength, Cassian guided with wisdom, or so everyone believed. For the past year, something strange had been happening. Border skirmishes with a neighboring pack, the Thornwood territory, had grown more frequent. Warriors returned from patrol bruised, bleeding, sometimes not returning at all. The council blamed Thornwood's aggression. The king prepared for a larger conflict. But Lyra noticed something the council did not. She was the one who treated the wounded. She was the one who saw the wounds up close, cleaned them, stitched them, and listened to the soldiers' pained words as they drifted in and out of consciousness. And the wounds did not make sense. Thornwood warriors were known for using long spears and heavy blades, weapons meant for open battlefields, but the injuries Lyra treated were different. They were precise, clean, the kind of wounds made by someone who knew exactly where to strike to cause pain without killing quickly. They looked less like battle wounds and more like warnings. At first, Lyra told herself she was imagining things. She was only a healer. She did not understand strategy or war, but the feeling would not leave her. Night after night, as she cleaned blood from her hands, the same question repeated in her mind. Why did the wounds not match the enemy everyone blamed? One evening, a young soldier named Torin was carried into the healing wing. He had been on patrol near the eastern border and had returned barely breathing. Lyra worked quickly, but she could see from the moment they laid him down that his injuries were too severe. She held his hand as his breathing slowed, trying to bring him comfort in his final moments. His eyes opened weakly, searching for something. Lyra leaned closer. "Who did this to you?" she asked gently. "Was it Thornwood?" Torin's lips moved, but no sound came out. Lyra leaned in even closer, her ear near his mouth. "Vale," he whispered. It was Vale. Then his hand went still. Lyra sat frozen, staring at the young man who had just died in her arms. Vale. Lord Cassian Vale. The king's most trusted friend. It could not be true. It made no sense. Cassian was loved by everyone. He had helped raise funds for the healing wing. He had spoken kindly to Lyra more than once, unlike most nobles who ignored her completely. She told herself it was a mistake. Perhaps the soldier meant something else. Perhaps the pain had confused his mind in his final moments. But she could not stop thinking about it. That night, she did not sleep. She sat by candlelight, staring at the ceiling, replaying his final words over and over. The next morning, Lyra made a decision that would change everything. She decided to look closer, quietly, carefully, without telling anyone what she suspected. She began keeping a private record of every wounded soldier she treated, noting the type of injury, the location of the attack, and the date. She compared this to the official reports the council released about Thornwood's supposed attacks. The patterns did not match. Several attacks blamed on Thornwood had happened on nights when Thornwood scouts were reportedly seen far from the border, according to old patrol logs Lyra found buried in the record room, a place few people visited. She also noticed that certain supply shipments meant for the king's warriors had gone missing before major skirmishes, always around the same time Lord Cassian was said to be personally reviewing the kingdom's resources. Lyra knew she was stepping into dangerous territory. She was not a noble. She had no power, no title, no army behind her. If she accused a lord as respected as Cassian Vale without solid proof, she would likely be punished for spreading lies, perhaps even executed for slander against the crown's closest advisor. But she could not stop now. Too many warriors were dying, and something told her the truth mattered more than her own safety. She spent weeks searching quietly. She spoke gently with wounded soldiers, asking careful questions about what they remembered before they were attacked. Slowly, a picture began to form. Several soldiers mentioned seeing signals, small fires lit at strange hours near supposedly secret patrol routes that only a handful of people in the castle knew about, routes that Cassian had access to as the king's advisor. Then, one rainy evening, a wounded messenger arrived at the healing wing, his shoulder torn open. As Lyra treated him, she noticed a leather satchel strapped across his body, damaged from the attack. Papers had spilled slightly from inside. Her eyes caught a flash of a wax seal, one she recognized instantly. It was Cassian's personal crest, stamped onto a folded letter tucked deep within the satchel. Her heart pounded. She knew she should not look. It was not her place. But something inside her, perhaps the memory of Torin's final whispered words, pushed her forward. While the messenger drifted into an exhausted sleep from the pain medicine she had given him, Lyra carefully slid the letter free and read it in the dim candlelight. The words confirmed everything she had feared. It was written in code, but Lyra had spent enough nights studying old patrol maps and supply records to recognize certain phrases. The letter spoke of weakening the king's western forces before the next full moon, of ensuring certain shipments never reached their destination, of maintaining the illusion of Thornwood's aggression. It was signed with Cassian's private mark, one Lyra had seen before on personal correspondence, delivered to the healing wing. Cassian Vale was not protecting the kingdom. He was slowly destroying it from the inside, feeding false information to a rival pack, allowing warriors to be wounded and killed, all to weaken King Draven's power and strengthen his own influence in secret. Lyra sat there for a long time, the letter trembling in her hands. She thought about the danger of what she now knew. She thought about the soldiers who had died. She thought about young Torin, who had used his last breath to try to warn someone, anyone, before it was too late. She made her decision. She would speak the truth, even if it cost her everything. The next council meeting was set to take place in 3 days, a large gathering where nobles, warriors, and advisors would meet before the king to discuss the growing conflict with Thornwood. Lyra knew this was her only chance. She could not simply hand the letter to a guard or another noble. Someone loyal to Cassian could easily make it disappear. She had to speak in front of everyone, where the truth could not be silenced or hidden. For the next 3 days, Lyra barely slept. She hid the letter carefully, sewn into the lining of her healer's robe. She continued her work as normal, treating patients, mixing medicine, trying not to draw attention to herself. But inside, her heart raced constantly, knowing what she was about to do. On the day of the council meeting, the great hall of Veremore Castle was filled with nobles, warriors, and advisors, all gathered before King Draven's throne. Lord Cassian Vale stood proudly near the king, being praised once again for his wisdom in guiding the kingdom's defense against Thornwood's supposed attacks. The room buzzed with admiration for him. Lyra stood at the back, dressed simply, easily overlooked among the grand robes and polished armor of the court. Her hands trembled slightly, but her mind was clear. She thought of Torin. She thought of every soldier she had treated, every family who had lost someone to wounds that never should have happened. As the meeting reached its peak, with Cassian speaking confidently about increasing forces along the border, Lyra stepped forward. A hush fell over parts of the room as people noticed the healer walking toward the throne, something almost unheard of during a formal council. A guard moved to stop her, but King Draven, curious, raised his hand to allow her to approach. Lyra stood before the throne, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. She looked at Cassian, who watched her with a puzzled but calm expression, clearly not expecting a healer to interrupt his moment. Lyra took a breath. Then, in a clear and steady voice that carried across the silent hall, she spoke the sentence that would change everything. "The wolf you trust with your back is the one who's been baring his teeth at it." The hall fell into stunned silence. King Draven's expression shifted from confusion to something colder, sharper. Cassian's calm face flickered, just for a moment, a flash of something dangerous behind his eyes. "Explain yourself," King Draven said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that silenced any whispers beginning to spread. Lyra reached into the lining of her robe and pulled out the letter, her hands steady now despite her fear. She stepped forward and placed it in the king's hands, explaining everything: the mismatched wounds, the missing supplies, Torin's final words, the messenger's satchel, the code hidden within the letter. As King Draven read the letter, his face grew pale, then hardened with fury and heartbreak. He looked up at Cassian, the man he had trusted since childhood, the man who had stood beside him through every battle and celebration of his reign. "Is this true?" Draven asked, his voice breaking slightly despite his effort to remain strong. Cassian's expression shifted. The calm mask he had worn for years began to crack. He tried to speak, to explain, to deny it, but the words came out weak and unconvincing. Guards, sensing the shift in the room, moved closer to him. In a desperate moment, Cassian attempted to flee toward a side entrance, but King Draven himself moved faster, catching his old friend by the arm and forcing him to stop. The betrayal in the king's eyes was matched only by the sorrow in his heart, but he did not let go. "You will face a full trial," Draven said, his voice trembling with a mixture of grief and anger. "For everything you have done to this kingdom, and to the people who trusted you." The hall erupted into chaos, shocked whispers spreading as guards took Cassian away. Lyra stood quietly amid the noise, feeling both relieved and terrified by what she had just done. In the weeks that followed, the truth continued to unfold. Cassian's trial revealed a web of secret alliances with Thornwood leaders, years of manipulated reports, and stolen resources meant to weaken King Draven's forces while strengthening Cassian's own hidden influence. He was stripped of his title and banished from the kingdom forever, his conspirators rooted out one by one across the court. Almost immediately, the border conflicts that had plagued Veremore for over a year came to a complete stop. Thornwood, it turned out, had been manipulated as much as Draven's own kingdom, used as a pawn in Cassian's plan for power. With the deception exposed, peace between the two territories was finally restored. King Draven, humbled by the depth of the betrayal he had missed for so long, called Lyra before him once again, this time not in a chaotic council meeting, but in a quiet, personal audience. He thanked her for her courage, for seeing what his most trusted advisors had missed, and for risking her life to speak the truth when silence would have been so much safer. "You saved this kingdom," he told her gently, "not with strength or blades, but with honesty. That is a rare and powerful thing." He offered her the position of royal healer, a place of honor and respect within the court, along with a seat as his personal advisor on matters concerning the well-being of his people. Lyra, who had once been overlooked and unnoticed, now stood as one of the most trusted voices in the kingdom. Word of her courage spread throughout Veremore and beyond. She became known not as a powerful warrior or a noble born into privilege, but as the quiet healer who had dared to speak one honest sentence in a room full of people too afraid or too blind to see the truth themselves. Years later, when people spoke of the fall of Lord Cassian Vale and the peace that followed, they did not speak only of King Draven's leadership. They spoke of Lyra Sundale, the healer who had listened closely enough to notice what others ignored, who had gathered proof no one else thought to look for, and who had found the courage to speak up when it mattered most. Her story became a reminder to the people of Veremore, passed down through generations, that truth does not always come from those with the most power or the loudest voice. Sometimes, it comes from the quietest person in the room, the one who has been paying attention all along, waiting for the moment to finally be heard. And in that one sentence, spoken by a healer no one expected to matter, an entire kingdom was changed forever.